Karena Hi, Alan. How are you?
Hi, good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, good. Thank you very much. Okay, well, I think few more students already coming. Shall we start? Yeah, let me
Sure.
greet my student first. Selamat pagi semuanya. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everybody. Good
Good
afternoon to you,
morning.
Alan, in Sydney.
Good morning.
Okay, so we going to continue our discussions on motivational theories. Dr. Alan Lee from the University of New South Wales has been giving us a talk last week about determination theory, and she's continue her talks today about the how to increase student engagement in teaching. And Alan, the students here are from mathematics educations. There are postgraduate students. And from your last talk, they say that they are very inspired. And thank you very much for that you speaking to us slowly so we could understand, we could follow your talks fluently. Again, thank you very much for your time for us today. And I think without further ado, please, Dr. Alan Lee, time is yours.
Thank you, Enda. I changed up the order of the lecture just a little bit. I've sent Enda the full lecture slides. I'm not sure if you've received it. It's over 100 pages long. But I've just organized the 4 different lectures so you can see. And so what I'm actually going to talk about today is the first part of multidimensional perspectives on growth. So I'll just share my screen.
That's fine, Alan.
Yeah. So the document that Enda would have received is this one. Okay. So what I wanted to cover today, as I just mentioned, is part 1 of multidimensional perspectives on growth. And next week, I will also be talking about this multidimensional perspective on growth, but specifically with goals. Today, we're going to start talking about intelligence. And you might be sitting there thinking, oh, why does this impact motivation? And we're just going to unpack it a bit today and talk about the association about how intelligence, your perspective on intelligence, your beliefs on intelligence could potentially impact the teacher and then also the student as well. All right, so I was looking on Zoom to see if I can do a poll, but I don't think I can because I'm not hosting. But I want you to think about whether you believe intelligence is fixed at birth. Do you agree? Do you think this is true or do you think this is false? All right. Whether intelligence is fixed at birth. The other way we can think about this is whether you think intelligence can be changed, basically. Is it malleable or is it fixed? Right? Because this is a very, very important question. Okay.
That's
Yes.
the course, Alan.
Sorry.
I put you on a course already.
Wonderful. Okay, so let's see if I can. Oh, no, not this one. Sorry, polls. Okay, let's see if I can see this. Then we can sort of get a. Here we go. Oh, is this in Indonesian? The question? No? Am I? Because I don't think I can make a quiz, but that's okay. That's all right. Okay. What about I ask you in the chat, why don't you put in if you think that this is true, then put a T. And if you think this is false, why don't you put an F in the chat?
Silahkan ditulis di kolom chat. Menurut kalian kecerdasan itu bawaan lahir atau tidak?
Wonderful. Okay. There is somewhat of a mixture, and I find it very interesting. And when I ask this question, I always get a mix. And it always depends on whether, from what I've personally experienced, whether someone has anyone in their lives, whether they've taught or a family member, neighbor, or friends with a child with an intellectual disability. Because yes, you might feel that a student who has general ability without an intellectual disability may increase in intelligence. But the question that I always get is, Ellen, what about students with a disability? What does this theory or does this question apply to them as well? I can talk about that question for 10 weeks, right? But I won't go into that today because today we need to focus on motivation. I want you to think about and just remember what your responses to this question was. And we can see it in this chat. And what is encouraged according to research of how you should perceive intelligence as. But before we touch on that, let's talk about the definition of intelligence. So you might have looked at or thought of intelligence, and you might have your own definitions of intelligence. However, what's really interesting about the definition of intelligence is that after reviewing, there's apparently more than 70 plus definitions of intelligence, which means that there's no one consistent definitions of intelligence. Okay. Right? So, which means that if we look at what Sternberg has said, viewed narrowly, there seems to be almost as many definitions of intelligence as there were experts asked to define it. So every time an expert in intelligence is asked, why don't you define intelligence? There's another definition. Right? However, just if we look at what we're going to talk about today, we can look at intelligence measures and agents' ability to achieve goals in a wide range of environments. So it's not just fixated in one environment, but we're looking at a large different sphere of environments. Okay, so when we look at mindsets and specifically when we talk about mindsets, what we are looking at, the question that we're always looking at is it growth or is it fixed? Is intelligence something that can grow or is it fixated at birth? In another way, what we're asking is, do you believe whether cognitive ability is fixed at birth or is it something that can grow, right? So the question that I'm asking you is, what is your attitude, right? Because towards intelligence, because this will determine how you as an individual will respond to situation, right? So if you have a growth mindset, which means that if you think that intelligence can grow, right? If you believe that intelligence can grow and it's not fixed at birth, this may possibly mean that if you experience or you're working with a student that is constantly struggling or maybe failing, at something over and over again, do you believe that it is important to re-motivate the students? Remember, last week I spoke about how motivation needs to be constantly socially fed. And that is one of the most important roles as a teacher, right? Because there's active participation, this is cognitive aspect. As school gets more challenging, right, motivation decreases, right? Does this mean that students who may not have the strongest or highest cognitive ability, what do you do with these students? How do you work with these students? What is your attitude to these students? Right? So depending on what kind of mindset that you hold, this could be very, very interesting with how you approach as an educator. Okay, so if we look at some research that looks at growth mindset, I'm using the term here, and I'll touch on it more next week, with mastery oriented, and this is associated with goal orientation theory, and it's part of the self theory and this goal theory. And very, very quickly, what it's looking at in goal orientation, so you understand this study, is that there's two goal orientations. There's mastery and there's performance goal orientation. And mastery goal orientation here is associated with intrinsic motivation, right? And performance goal orientation is associated with extrinsic motivation. And if you recall back from last week, intrinsic motivation is the motivation where it's all internalized. The individual is self-regulated to master a particular skill. They're interested in increasing their skill level as opposed to being influenced by external factors. Okay, so that's what the IM is. If there's intrinsic motivation increases, there seems to be a positive association with mastery orientation. And this is specifically with fifth graders with a challenging activity. Okay, so positive association with mastery orientation, with optimism, positive affect, and effective strategies. And this is where the cognition comes into play, right? Whereas if there's a decrease in intrinsic motivation, this is when students experience learned helplessness, right? And this is where we can see that the student fail. They get us, there's a negative association, sorry, I should say, negative association, and that's what this is, negative association with perceiving that they failed because of a lack of ability. Okay, so this is almost looking at it saying that I do not have control over my what I am doing, right? So there's this externalization of control, whereas with mastery, there's this internalization of control. So that's why there's this negative association with a lack of ability. Okay, so you can see the importance of the association with intrinsic motivation. Okay, and if we look at even more research here, we can see here that there is the helpless orientation versus the master orientation, that it's associated with this fixed intelligence as opposed to malleable intelligence. So this is the belief that the student's intelligence can grow, right? That's why it's malleable. Whereas this helpless orientation, these individuals have a belief that intelligence cannot change, right? And why this is important is because there's this link with performance goals. Performance goals, in a nutshell, is talking about people who are doing a particular activity because they want to show off. They want to demonstrate how well they're doing. Their ranking is very important, right? What they can show to their peers is very important. So they don't want to show their colleagues or their friends that they failed because they don't know, right? Which is really, really interesting. Whereas here, it's about learning goals. Remember, there's a positive association with intrinsic motivation with mastery orientation. So as a default, that means that when a person has this belief that intelligence is malleable and that it can grow, there is an association with intrinsic motivation. Whereas because performance goals are all external, there's an association or relationship with extrinsic motivation. So the big question that you should be asking yourself right now is what happens when a student is given a very difficult activity that they have to do, right? So if a mastery-oriented individual is given a very difficult activity, very challenging activity, it's most likely that they would do it. Why? They don't care about failing because they are focused on increasing their skills. That's their aim, the learning goal, right? As opposed to these individuals in the helpless orientation, when they're given an activity that is challenging and they know that there is a potential of failure, they won't even try. Why? They would rather tell people, I didn't try. That's why I failed, not because I don't know how to do it, right? Because their aim is to demonstrate to the individuals that they're highly intelligent, right? And they want people to look at that, right? And what's really interesting here is there is an association with a perception on ability and amount of effort that they need to contribute when they're about to do a learning activity. Okay, so if we look at this scale, right, from fixed mindset to growth mindset, you can see it can go back and forth. Okay, so if we look at this entity versus incremental, so we can see here the intelligence is an entity that dwells within us and we can't change, right? This is the fixed perspective of intelligence. So basically, if you believe intelligence is fixed, you are born with it and there's nothing else you can do about it, right? Whereas on the flip side, when there is this malleable theory of intelligence, what's really important with these individuals is effort. Intelligence can increase through one's effort, right? So that they believe that effort is more important than ability. Isn't that very interesting? So these individuals, remember, their focus is mastering a skill. So of course they're going to think that effort is more important. Whereas with people with a fixed level of intelligence, because they're associated with performance goals and they want people to see how intelligent they are, naturally, they don't put any effort in. So some of you guys might have in high school or primary school, friends that might say, I didn't study for a test. And then they come first in the test. Did you know people like that in high school? Right? Yeah, really annoying. Like I find them, I used to always be like, how do you get first when you didn't study? Whereas in actuality, they did study, but they don't want people to know that they studied because they want people to think that they're naturally intelligent, very performance oriented. Whereas you can see here, and what's really like the Achilles heel is that because they want people to think that they're highly intelligent, they're very scared of people knowing if they failed, right? Whereas malleable in theories of intelligence, those individuals that believe effort is more important, failure is another learning experience. So they don't avoid, right? Very, very interesting. Okay. So if we looked at it from a student perspective, how would you know if your student held a fixed mindset or a growth mindset? Okay, so these are some of the words that they may be using within your lesson. So have a look. Okay, you can see here, if a student has a lot, they are in good shape. But if they don't have, there's not much they can do about it. Right? You can see here, I only have a certain amount of ability, and then that's it. Okay? Look at this. Feeling smart, easy, low effort success, outperforming others. So you can see the language is very much about what other people think. Do I feel smart? Am I smart with putting a little bit of effort? Right? And this one here, the focus is looking smart and not look dumb. Right? So you can see here the students, their aim is to make sure everyone knows how smart they are. And also avoid people thinking that they're dumb, right? These are the types of words students in your class may hold if they have this fixed mindset belief about intelligence. Okay, what about if they have a growth mindset? So have a look at these. Ability can be developed and strengthened over time, right? You can see that there's this underlying assumption of putting effort in, investing effort in. The more effort I put in, the more I will learn and my ability can improve, right? The association with effort and ability. Okay. Easy task, waste of time. Interesting, isn't it? So these individuals, right, are more likely to choose the difficult, challenging task as opposed to a task that they already know that they can do. Why? Because their aim is to increase their skill levels. So if you give a student a choice, right? Two groups of students. One has a growth mindset, the other has a fixed mindset. And you give them options, right? Autonomy, options of a difficult, challenging task and an easy task. The fixed mindset individuals would choose the easy task. Be like, yay, I did it. And I know how to do it, right? Because they can show people I got 100% or I only got one wrong. Whereas if they choose the challenging task, there's that fear, I'm going to look dumb. I don't want to put effort in. Whereas the growth mindset individuals, they think the easy task is a waste of time. Why? Their aim is to increase skill sets. So they will choose the challenging ones because they perceive that as this opportunities. Opportunities to learn something new, right? So it's really important that we understand what kind of mindset our students are actually holding in the classroom. Because as educators, we do want to challenge them. We do want to push them so they are improving and they're growing, right? But if they're in a position where they're competitive, competition is fine, right? But if that's their only objective, is to come first, is for other people to view them as someone that's highly intelligent, it can get quite difficult in the classroom. Okay, so if we look at this growth mindset, it can be domain specific. Okay, so when we talk about domain specific, we're talking about subjects, specific subjects such as maths, such as English, such as science, right? Such as psychology. So depending on the individual's experience, previous experience, whether they believe whether they hold a growth mindset or a fixed mindset will be determined. Okay, so if a student has entity belief in maths, but an incremental belief in English, right? Then that is also domain specific, right? The self-theory a student holds in a specific area obviously affects their motivation. Okay, but as you can see here, students may hold both beliefs in a certain extent in this continuum. And the continuum that we are referring to is this line here. Okay, so you might sit there thinking, oh, I might be here, or like I might not be all the way here, but I might sit somewhere around here. A lot of people are like that, right? Because it is a continuum. Okay, and this is why, once again, the role of the teacher is very important, because depending on the classroom setting, right? The classroom nature. If a teacher is saying after every test, I'm going to hand out the test papers in order from last to first, a person that may be growth will go all the way down to fixed, right? But so it really is dependent. It can be dependent on the nature or the environment, the learning environment that is set by the teacher. Okay. All right. So there's this wonderful website that I really, really love going to. And I've provided a link here, brainology.us. And I believe that it is developed by Carol Dweck. And she put in a lot of different resources in relation with growth mindset. So I wanted to just go through with you some of the characteristics of mindset. Okay. So as you can see here, if we like I've mentioned so many times already, with the fixed mindset, individuals believe intelligence is a fixed trait. Growth mindset, intelligence is a malleable quality and there's potential that can be developed, right? The association, fixed mindset, and when we look at specifically goals, and we'll talk about more next week, I promise, you can see fixed mindsets may say here, the main thing I want when I do my schoolwork is to show how good I am, right? Looking smart is most important. Whereas with growth mindset, it's much more important for me to learn in my classes than it is to get the best grades. Okay? And if we move on, strategies after failure. This is the thing that always interests me the most. What do you do when a student fails after a test? What can we do right there? Okay, because are you going to leave these students who are helpless stay in this fixed mindset, or is there going to be focus on resilience? right? I think last week, someone asked me about an experiment in relation with self-determination theory. I think this would be an also very interesting experiment to do if you can apply this. Phase 1, students, everyone does something highly difficult, or you can even have 2 groups in phase 1, difficult, high, and low. And then if you have students that fail, do you tell them everyone's intelligence is fixed anyways? No matter how much effort you put in, it doesn't matter. This is already hard. Or would you tell them, actually, this is definitely difficult, but these are the strategies that you can do, you can use. What would you do? So there is a manipulation here. Right, and I believe that there isn't any studies that have looked at that yet, but I think it'll be very, very interesting here. So you can see here, because right after failure, this is an experienced, right? So is the student going to sit there and think, okay, I'm going to give up. I'm never going to take this subject again, or maybe I can cheat. Because this is what studies have shown. Fixed mindsets more likely to cheat. Why? Because their focus is about getting the high marks as opposed to learning, right? Okay, so if we look at the effects of intelligence versus effort, we can see here fixed growth, fixed mindset, growth mindset. What are the goals? Looking smart versus learning. Level of confidence after a difficult trial, level of motivation after a difficult trial, level of performance after a difficult trial. You can see the differences right here. Okay. There's an association also with the zone of proximal development. Is everyone familiar with Vygotsky's zone of proximal development? Yes? Yes, yes, wonderful. Okay, thank you for nodding. All good. Okay, so Vygotsky's zone of proximal development is also associated with how we can work with students with whether they have fixed mindsets or growth mindset. You can see here with the growth mindset, if they're in the area, the zone where they students can do things independently, they feel smart then. Right? However, in the growth mindset, these students they're bored, right? As soon as students enter the ZPD, they get frustrated. And when it gets even more impossible, they disengage and they won't do anything. Whereas with the growth mindset, when they're in the ZPD, feels challenged, and when things are even more difficult, because we know that even in the external circle, even with help, they can't do the activity, they still remain effective. Right? So this is really, I find this very, very interesting as well, because you can see here a very stark comparison with how they behave, how they approach different types of activities. Okay, depending on whether they have growth or fixed mindset. There is a TED Talk link that I've provided in the link here by Carol Dweck, and I won't play it, but you can watch it. And what she emphasizes in this TED Talk is the power of yet. So when the student has failed a particular activity and they come up to you and go, "Oh, Ellen, Miss Ellen, I'm never going to be able to pass this," right? You might want to challenge them and say, actually, you just haven't been able to pass it yet. You haven't learned this skill yet, right? So it's looking at it from a position of I am now determined to learn this and put the effort in because I will eventually learn it because of the power of yet. Okay. All right. So if we look at particular studies that specifically looked at growth mindset, there is a meta-analysis that was done in 2018. And what they found is that students with growth mindset are more likely to choose something that is challenging, and they're persistent when they're faced with setbacks, and they see the importance of effort, and they also look at higher examples. Okay, so these individuals will look at more effective cognitive strategies, right, to learn something as opposed to students with a fixed mindset. Okay, and what's really interesting here is this last point here, where it says some results that students with low socioeconomic status or who are academically at risk will benefit from these mindset interventions, because these individuals who may be from low socioeconomic status or who are at risk, when we talk about at risk, what we're referring to is students that might drop out of school, all right, who do not find the need to come back to school, right? This intervention of supporting them to move from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset will be very, very beneficial for these individuals. Some implications with students' mindset is that obviously we can see here these two pathways of whether it's fixed or growth intelligence can lead to students into very different pathways. And you can see here there's in relation with goals, learning opportunities, effort, failure, and strategies after failure can be very, very important. So when students are creating goals, how can we work with these students? And next week, I'm going to be, I know, even though it says, and I'm using the word smart here, versus learning, I'm going to talk about something called a SMART goal. And it's actually an abbreviation which looks at specific goals, measurable goals, attainable goals. And so these are goals, and how we can frame goals so students will be able to successfully achieve them, right? And if we talk, when we also talk about goals, we can also talk about whether it's avoidance or approach, okay? How individuals may approach or avoid a learning opportunity or a goal will also influence how they behave in a learning environment. And obviously, the perspective of whether an individual believes an effort is seen as something positive or something that is negative can really influence the student's behavior as well. And as I mentioned before, this notion of failure, where do these students attribute their failure? Is it because they lack the ability, they lack the effort, or was it poor strategy choice? Because dependent on these beliefs, right, the way that they will strategize, or maybe not even strategize, after failing will be determined. For example, if they believed it was a lack of ability because intelligence is fixed, there's nothing that they can do about it. So they won't do anything. They might just avoid. If they believe that it was a lack of effort, maybe they just didn't have enough time, right? Or they invested their time in something else, then they will increase their effort so they don't fail again. If it was poor strategy choice, it's most likely that they will choose another strategy the next time round. So depending on where they attribute the failure is very, very important. So if they also even look at an external factor like saying, I failed because the teacher really dislikes me, I was going to fail anyways, then there's nothing that the student can themselves do to really change their trajectory from failure to success. So it's really important that this needs to be understood and looked at. Okay, so if we look at, once again, here, the difference between fixed and growth mindset, you can see, once again, performance goals, learning goals. The fixed mindset wants to prove that there's a lot of intelligence, whereas with growth, learning priority. And here, seek positive judgments, avoid negative judgments, and obviously there are embracing of change. These two in particular will be quite important when we look at goal orientation, because with performance goal orientation, this will determine whether they're positive performance or negative performance, because there are people that are negatively performance oriented where they will just not do a learning activity because they do want to avoid negative judgments on them. Okay, if we look at effort, the individual's beliefs on effort, the people with fixed intelligence beliefs underestimate the importance of effort because they believe ability trumps effort. So if I use maths, because everyone's a math teacher here, you can see ability is better than effort. Whereas here, effort trumps ability. Okay, so they believe effort is useful. There is a role for effort. Whereas with the fixed, they don't believe that effort is important. So if you go to the orange writing at the bottom here, this may explain why high achieving students stop working in high school work because it becomes difficult. So a lot of primary school students who have succeeded cruise through kindergarten all the way to year 6, and they hit high school and they don't know what to do because suddenly the learning activities become difficult, right? Because for the longest time, maybe it could possibly be that ability was what was rewarded continuously as opposed to the amount of effort that they put in. Okay, whereas students that may have struggled, needed support in primary school and learned that with effort that they've succeeded, this is when they hit high school, it might not be anything new to them. So they'll continuously work to invest effort. Okay. If we look at failure and related strategies, and I know that I emphasize this quite a bit, where they attribute failure outside the control, right? It can lead to them with this negative strategy of, now I'm just going to not do it. I don't want to invest time into it because I failed anyways. Whereas here, attributes failure within their control. And it's because I didn't study hard enough or I didn't study the correct way, right? So what do? They spend more time studying for test. Okay, so you can see here, failing a test is usually a sign that students need to change their attitude and behavior and study strategies in the future, but they need to recognize that. They need to recognize maybe, or most likely, you have failed, not because it was beyond your control, but because actually it's because you didn't choose the right strategies. You didn't invest enough time and energy into studying. Okay, so this is from another website here, and I really like this because it's making you look at the mindset as a continuum. So have a look, and I will focus on the red, green, and yellow, just to re-emphasize what I've been saying. You can see here, if we just look at the red, when we look at the challenges, okay, avoids challenges completely. Low growth, takes on easy challenges, where if you're sort of sitting in the middle, prefers clear, immediate goals. And then you can see here all the way to embrace challenge. Okay. And you can see here with the encountering difficulty, there's a couple of letters missing here. You can see here, fixed gives up immediately. Whereas you can see here with high growth persists for longer periods of time. Okay. Look at this. Here, effort is associated with failure, right? Which is really interesting because actually effort, the more effort you invest, it's a good thing because it means that it's a pathway to mastery, right? So you can see this stark comparison between the growth and the fixed. And if we just continue here, look at this one, feedback. Fixed mindset, they will ignore feedback from the teachers. Have you ever worked with students like that where they just ignore what you are saying? Whereas you have students who are requesting, they want more feedback, critical feedback, right? And here, hides, making mistakes, hides and ignores, makes excuses when they make mistakes, right? Whereas high learning potential, right? So they look at these mistakes and go, why did I make these mistakes? If your colleague or your friend has succeeded, is there a difference? Yes, there is. Fixed mindset feels threatened, right? Whereas people with high growth, they may seek out successful people and try to learn from them. Okay? They don't feel threatened. And then if help is offered, fixed mindset turns down help. I don't need help. I'm okay. Whereas growth mindset, they do want help. So you can see here when we break things down that whether you have a fixed or a growth mindset can really influence how it can influence people's attitudes towards all of these different variables. Okay, so what can you do? Okay, so there's a couple of things you can do, as you can see here. Number one, and I started this lecture today with this question, with the question of intelligence. What is your beliefs or perceptions of ability or intelligence, right? Is it something that is fixed? Is it something that is malleable, right? It's very important that you yourself understand where you sit with this particular belief. It's always very helpful if this is taught to the students, that they understand the research behind the growth and fixed mindsets. I always emphasize this as being so important. Having conversations with individuals. So if you can show students or even parents that want to see evidence where the students started, how much evidence of effort that they've invested and where they are now, this can be very, very powerful. Okay. And then if you can also demonstrate and model that you have a growth mindset, this can also be very powerful as well. And these two last point here, and I know last week we talked about extrinsic motivation and the impact of rewards. And I spoke about what rewards hold. Rewards hold the emphasis of what is important, what is valued within your environment and context. So if there is a recognition that of effort and hard work paying off and that person is rewarded, this will really determine the environment of the classroom. Okay, because students who are rewarded, not because they just came first, but there has been growth in their development and learning, can be wonderfully supported if they are rewarded. And I'm just going to delete so I can emphasize something right here. And if you see here, the type of feedback, are you saying you're smart, that's why you can do it? As opposed to You're putting in effort, and that's why you can do it, right? There is a difference between here. And it goes to the type of language that is being used by educators or sometimes even parents as well. So have a look at this. It's a lot of what kind of feedback you can use. So this is examples of feedback. Okay. I really like this one here. How many ways did you try it before it turned out the way you wanted it? Right? What do you want to do next? Right? So you can see here there is an emphasis, right? As opposed to the middle sections, especially this one here, you're better than so-and-so, right? You can see here there is an immediate comparison. Okay, right? You can learn, you can stretch, you can keep mastering these things. So you can see here that there are words that you can use to encourage having a growth mindset in the classroom. This is the last slide for today. And I want you to think about how you would respond to these statements about teachers' mindset. Okay. All right, because these are questions that you can ask teachers so they think about, they reflect on their level of mindset as well. Right, and I really like this last question. Every teacher, no matter who they are, can significantly improve their teaching ability. And teachers can change, number 2, the way that they teach the classroom, but they can't really change the true teaching ability, right? Whereas actually you can change the ability to teach. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Silakan yang mau bertanya. That is very wonderful.
I didn't go over time today.
Well, we were happy that you are overtime. Silakan siapa yang mau bertanya. Any question about growth mindset? So, if I may ask my students, are you growth mindset person or fixed mindset person? Who you think you are? Which category you think you are? Boleh ditulis di kolom chat. Berta, you want to ask question?
I think
Yes,
Bertha.
Yeah.
Uh, First of all, I want to say thank you for Ma'am Ellen because it was an interesting topic. Because the explanation that you gave is very interesting, and I think it reveals my true mindset. Because back then, when I was in high school, my teacher once told me that when I understand the topic, I would try to do whatever the task, whatever the question about that topic. But when I don't understand, I will never try to dig in on that topic. I will never try to touch the task, the question, or whatever it is. And back then, I don't understand what is my teacher mean. And
Oh.
I was thought that, oh, it is because that's my intellectual. And that's why when you ask the question in the question, I say true, because I thought that the intelligence is depends on our genetics. But
Mhm.
because of the explanation, now I understand that I think my mindset is dominated with fixed mindset, even until now. And I'm so, what can I say? Kind of depressed of that because I see that fixed mindset is so bad for ourselves, also for students. And when we talk about the mindset, you always told that students' mindset is so depends on how we teach them. how we make an activity, how we make the classroom environment. But the question is, how if the teacher have that fixed mindset? How can the teachers can make students have that growth mindset when he or she itself have that fixed mindset? Uh, Also, we talk about the mindset, it's so hard to change it, right? To change from fixed to growth, it's kind of hard. And especially when we are not that kind of student, we don't have that teacher's roles anymore that can say us, oh, you are doing great. Oh, you can do better next time. What can you learn about from this situation, or etc. We don't have that kind of role that can talk to us. So what can we do as a teachers, teachers wannabe? What can we do as a teachers wannabe that can change our fixed
Your own
mindset to growth mindset so we can help students? That's the question that I want to ask. Thank you.
Yeah.
Ma'am
Thank you,
Ellen.
Bertha. Thank you. I think it's number one important that you yourself know what kind of mindset that you hold. And one of the reasons why I emphasized students' reactions or behaviors after they failed an activity is because that's when the role of the teacher really does come into play. So if you, for example, do a learning activity or you're doing a task and you realize it's very difficult to do you reach out for help? Right? Do you ask questions? Because all those different actions, actually, you might think that you might have a fixed mindset, but those different types of action of trying to get help from a mentor or a teacher, that's all demonstrative of the fact that actually you do have a growth mindset because you're seeking out for help. If you're not sure of something, do you get ask someone to do a critical eye and have a look at it before you approach to complete it? Right? So there are lots of different things. So especially when you are doing a challenging task, maybe what you can do is look at it and say, okay, if I come across obstacles, I'm going to ask for help from so and so, right? If I don't succeed, maybe I can go back and look at why I didn't succeed, and then what did I do during my learning process that didn't work, right? Because those kinds of thought processes are all demonstrative of having a growth mindset, right? And what's really important is this understanding, and I'll talk about it next week when I talk about personal best goals, is it's instead of looking at challenges between you and the person next to you, the person that you need to compare yourself to is actually you, right? So where did I start and where do I want to go next? But with an understanding that it's not just about you, but sometimes it's a collective as well, right? So I hope I answered your question. Yes.
Thank you, Ma'am Ellen. I think I should learn about myself more. Thank you so much.
Any more questions for Muhammad Al-Fateh? Yeah, you can. Yeah, go ahead.
Check. Okay, first of all, thank you so much for the opportunity. I think this is the really interesting topic for me. As I teach math, but it's new to me. I'm still struggling to understand my student and as well as myself. So my question is, sometimes there are a group of students where they are particularly not too interested in math subject, but they have a growth mindset in other subject. Despite for as a teacher, we in the beginning we deciding how we teach them. For example, when I give them tasks about mathematical subject, an example of something, uh, I give an example for other subject such as art, which is some students have interested in it. And some students show they interest to learn when I give an example when it's other subject other than math. So it's okay. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit nervous.
That's okay.
So how to support student growth mindset, and at
Yeah.
the same time, it's still in the math subject. I mean, I don't want to lose their growth mindset,
Mm-hmm.
even though they are not interested in math, they're interested in other subject. But
Mhm.
as a math teacher, we have to still teach them math, most likely like that. Yeah. How to I think my question is a little bit technical about how to design the tags for student that in the condition like that. Thank you.
It's all right. Um, so the question was how to motivate students in maths to have a growth mindset. Is that what it was? Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Because I pointed out that growth mindset are usually in domain specific, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. Yeah, that's right. Math is very hard. And I always say this, it's very hard because it can get very challenging. But I think what's really powerful, and it has to do with mastery and association with mastery and self-belief, because there's something called self-efficacy, which is also associated with individuals' belief that they can actually do something, is to, number one, I think you need to find out why they don't like maths. Because if they don't like maths because they failed a lot, well, I've spoken about what you can do as a result, like after failure quite a bit. If they don't like maths because they're never coming first, well, then the emphasis of the classroom has to shift quite a bit, right? So there are certain things that you can do. Number one, what is being emphasized in the classroom in relation with what is the most important thing in your math classroom, right? Is it getting an A plus? Is it getting a B plus? Or is it showing that you are actually learning something? And how do you actually show someone that they've learned something? Right, so there's a really neat video that I show to a lot of my undergraduate students, where in the math class, actually, the math teacher, after the math test, don't give the marks back for a whole week. They don't actually show the students where they've gone wrong. It's where they've gotten right. So what they do instead is the students do the math test. And then after the teacher has finished marking it, the teacher highlights areas that a lot of students got wrong, right? Before they even get the marks. So what she's trying to do is shift the focus from the final mark to, okay, where did the students struggle with the most in class and what can they learn now from it? And students complained, they didn't like it because it's not something that they were used to, because they want to know what their marks are, right? But the teacher said, stop, I'm not going to give it to you now. This is what we need to focus on. And their attention was looking at where things went wrong for a lot of students, as opposed to how well did I do. So I thought that was very interesting.
Thank you,
Thank
Alan.
you very much.
Muhammad alfabet tadi sudah tangkap ya?
Ya, saya ada beberapa yang saya terima kasih.
Jadi nggak fokus pada nilai banyak, tapi pada ini proses pengerjaan matematiknya. Okay, any more question? I'd like to invite one more students to ask questions. Alan? No? No? Okay, Alan, I just checked my email that I received your email with the PowerPoint.
Mm-hmm.
I'll share that to the students. Yeah.
I thought having everything all at once would be more useful than separate documents.
Then separated. Okay. All right. So if students you talk about growth mindset, and then next week you talk about the goal setting.
Yes, we're looking at goal setting next week, and then we'll finish off with engagement and motivation.
Okay. All right, students. So you should read again about growth mindset, of course. And next week we're going to talk about goal setting.
Mhm.
Let me just encourage my students in Bahasa Indonesia. Jadi goal setting itu seperti kita kalau mau kurus gitu kan, niat mau kurus dalam waktu 2 bulan gitu kan. Jadi dalam 2 bulan saya harus kurus. Atau kalau kaitannya dengan tugas akhir, semester 8 saya harus selesai, semester 4 saya harus selesai tesis. Jadi punya ini aku punya sesuatu yang ingin diraih. Nah, sama juga dalam kuliah seperti ini, so similar to like attending professor course like this, you should also try to motivate yourself. I don't know whether your goal is to have more understanding on the motivational theories, or you want to try as well your English. Perhaps you want to get higher grade from my course or other goals. Try to motivate yourself. Okay. Well, Alan, I think that's for today. Thank you very much. It is very inspiring, and looking forward to listening to you again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alan.
Thanks,
Have a nice day.
You
Keep
too.
warm.
You too. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Baik para mahasiswa, kita cukupkan ya dekatnya nanti setelah di perkuliahan. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you, Miss
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you.
Okay, I close from here.